Welcome to the Nonprofits. Again, for the third and final segment this week, we set aside the active combat zone that is the American educational system and look at something a little bit more concrete, global population. There can't be any disagreements on that, can there? Eli Slack, please tell me there are some things in this world we can all agree on.
Absolutely. And now it's time for the song of my people, science. Josiah Slang Ritter, a postdoc researcher from Aalto University in Finland, and some others are suggesting that the Earth might contain significantly more humans than we think. Ritter's paper, published in Nature Communications, took data from rural dam projects where companies know exactly how many people they displaced to build the dams because they had to pay each of them for displacing them. And then they compared that data to official estimates of populations and found that official estimates undershot the more precise dam project data by between 53 to 84%, depending on the area. Now, on the surface, this seems to me like solid reasoning, but experts are cautiously skeptical, noting that while there's good reason to invest more research into rural populations, having a correction on the order of a few billion people is a little bit outside of the realm of reality for the first preliminary data. This story is from Popular Mechanics by Darren Orff on June 21st, 2025.
All right. And we're going to come right back to you with the questioning beginning with Eli, the science guy. Eli, Chris, where the hell is Eli's theme song?
Scott, get out of your dream world. You know we don't have the budget for that kind of a thing.
All right.
We'll talk about that.
Eli, anyway, as a fellow nerd, what's your take on this?
It's interesting to me.
That was horrible. That was a bad joke. Sorry, please continue.
It's interesting to me. I like the method. I think he knows or suspects at least that the companies building the dams are going to have more precise and verifiable, honestly, records about how many people were there because they had to pay them. So they needed bank accounts, they needed addresses, they needed to know how many people were in each home and all things like that. So when you compare that to estimates from organizations like World Pop or GWP, Grump, Landscan, and GHS Pop, which sound like
Grump.
international, Grump sound like international like pop bands in a way. But he found this discrepancy. He said, hey, look, and it was significant. And so it got published. And it does matter because we allocate funds to rural areas based on their population densities. So if we're underrepresenting them, we are underserving them. But I think it's also a good representation of a scientific method because we saw in the article he had some criticism from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. A researcher named Stuart Geedle Baston said essentially, I'm kind of extrapolating from what he said, but just because it's compelling, that doesn't mean that it's true. It's something. It's common for it's common to find something and think like, oh, like this is, if this is true, this changes everything. And the first step in that is follow that data, see why you have that discrepancy before you start making like grandiose claims.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Stephen, what's your take on this? I think that you have a slightly less enthusiastic perspective here than Eli. So what can you add that as a counterpoint?
Yeah, no, I think this is really good science for when you're sitting on the shitter. I think it's really entertaining for a couple
when
minutes.
The best science happens anyway, right? Isn't that kind
of where you guys read for this show?
Right.
Again, like this isn't my field of expertise, but it seems to me that there are snags, there are unaccounted shortcomings in this approach. Whether you're looking at areas that are specifically affected by dams. So that isn't a fair representation of the global rural population, right? Areas where there's going to be dams are areas where there's going to be water and there's going to be already an abnormally large number of people. So that kind of tracks with the data.
Mhm.
It seems, and like 35 areas is really a niche area, and especially when it's like like river based areas, 35 across the global, like that's not a very in-depth um
So you want
population.
you like a big sample size is what you're saying. Stephen
Ab-
Harder loves a big
Absolutely.
sample size.
The bigger the better.
All
Absolutely.
right. All right.
That's what I'm all about
All
here.
right. Good to
But
know.
yeah, like, and if like, and again, like, I can't be an expert in everything. I can't be an expert in many things. And if so, I rely on experts who actually have dug into the material to know their shit.
Right.
And if the experts aren't convinced, then I find I'm like I trust them until they have when they have good reason to draw a red flag around it, then that's, I think, is a great time to draw more conclusions, not to start investigating, but to let's get a more robust understanding.
Fair point. Fair point. I have to hand that to you. So, as a math teacher, of course, this article is really like just gold for me, right? It was basically, we're talking about people that messed up the math because they were making incorrect assumptions, and I love throwing those kind of problems out to my students to not only to practice the math, and then they have to use math to justify their arguments, but then to realize that we all make assumptions in all cases. And so we need to make sure that we are aware of the assumptions that we're making, and we need to test those assumptions. So here's a situation where we had a lot of money and effort and science has gone into things like predicting world population, and we discover a flaw in our system based off of faulty assumptions. That is just the math teacher mother load right there. It's just perfect learning opportunity. So I'll ask Eli here first. So what lessons can we learn from this, either generally about being good scientists or specifically about this issue? What do you think we can learn here?
I think in part, we can't always trust our measurements, and it's either because these international pop bands are incorrect about the world population, or because Lang
If you
Ritter
can't
is
trust an
incorrect.
international pop band, who can you trust?
Maybe Josiah's Lang Ritter. Maybe he's got the right answer, but
Maybe he's got Grump backing him up, though. So
well, no, he disagrees with Grump.
Oh, right. Well, of course.
Has a discrepancy. But that's what I think is when you find a discrepancy between your data and other data, somebody got it wrong. Don't assume that it's not you.
Right.
I think it's just as plausible for it to be you as it is for it to be the other guy. And when it's you or everyone else for the past several decades, you have to realize that it's more likely for it to be you that is wrong. But like I said earlier, find why there's a discrepancy. Find like what would I expect to see if there was 50% more people on the earth than I think that there are, and then go out and look for that. And if you can't find that, let's reconsider.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe ask why we didn't find it.
Exactly. Yeah. Why wouldn't we find it? Is there some reason we wouldn't have found that? Is there something else that I might see in the result? Like you can keep investigating it, but it's not quite time yet to start drawing conclusions and like rerouting resources based on one study.
Right. I think one of the themes that Eli was just talking about is the idea of intellectual humility. We need to be open to the possibility that we've made mistakes because we're human beings. We have egos, we have predispositions, we have biases, and so forth. Stephen, I wonder if you could comment briefly on what are your thoughts on the role of intellectual humility and that kind of thing in the scientific community and in general as we as the human species learn about our world and our universe?
Yeah.
Just a tiny little question there for you.
That's great. One of the best parts about deconstructing and stepping away from the faith is the humility that I was able to tap into, because when I was a Christian, I didn't need to be too humble because I had all the motherfucking answers. And Yeah, and and what was interesting about the looking at this article from a meta perspective is how it reminded me of that desire to feel like, oh yeah, I know something that other people do. I understand this world the way that the world in a way that the rest of the world doesn't understand.
Right.
I'm a little bit
Right.
special, right? And I think that's what makes an article heading like this one extra alluring, extra appealing. It's just like, I have this information that what the rest of the world doesn't know. Like we've been doing this wrong the whole time. Like I'm just a sucker for that, and that was a big draw for me. And my spirituality was just the fact that I had special wisdom. So
Right.
yeah, like humility and being able to understand why we're wrong and is a huge thing. It's the only way that we can move forward.
Yeah, and the way that you were phrasing that just triggered something in my brain. So I'm going to ask Eli this additional question here. Conspiracy theories. So how can we link that? We've been talking about intellectual humility. Stephen was talking about having being privy to inside information or having the inside scoop on the quote unquote real truth. TM. How is this kind of thing? Do you think this would be? Is this fuel for a conspiracy theory, or is this going to maybe debunk a conspiracy theory, or how is that going to link in there?
I've already got one. As soon as you said conspiracy theory, between then and now, I've got one. So yeah, absolutely. Like it could. I mean, I don't believe it, but you can come up with one that easily. The extra 4 billion people are the ancient race of aliens that built the pyramids and went underground to hide, and now they're coming back up and they look like humans. Naturally, that's why we didn't find them over the past decade's worth of data. So
Right.
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Something like that, I
This
suppose, is
feels
bound to come up. There's no, I mean, it seems like it takes very little excuse, just a tiny little kernel of an idea, and then somebody's making a conspiracy theory about that.
Yeah. And archaeologists or like historians 10,000 years from now will find that I was the one that started that because I'm the first one to say it on the internet.
All right. Eliism.
That's what I'm going to be responsible for. And I'm like, man, all right.
All right. That's your legacy, Eli, right there. Is
Congratulations.
Of all the things I've said others. But I think yes, it's absolutely it can be a breeding ground for conspiracy, but it's just another reason people say, oh, you can't trust scientists. Scientists have an agenda. Scientists are controlled by their benefactors. Donors is the word I was looking for. I don't know how benefactors came to me easier than donors, but it's this idea that the scientific community is they or them and or like the government, and whatever they are saying can't be trusted. So like if they are saying it's raining and you stick your hand outside and you feel the rain, you're going to be like, no, they're probably just, spraying water on my house with a hose to make me think it's raining, because I'm going to believe anything except
weather manipulation, I think, is the words you were looking for there. Weather manipulation. Yeah. Because we know, of course, that's a thing now, right?
Yeah. They're changing my climate.
Yeah, exactly. So Stephen, I wanted to, Eli was talking about how we might be undermining trust in science, or at the very least giving ammunition to those who want to foment that kind of distrust in science. Do you think? I mean, because when I look at this, I see this as a strength of the scientific process. The idea that we can correct ourselves, and you were mentioning earlier about how you had this unassailable knowledge in your brain when you were religious. And I mean, how does that play into this? Is this going to be the crack in the dam that's going to break and all science is going to come crumbling down, or is this just a reassurance and reaffirmation of the strength of the scientific approach? Is this a good or a bad thing for the scientific method and for those of us that care about that?
I think the system doesn't need to be perfect. If there are inconsistencies, if there's questions, that's signs that this system is working. It's when everything works out just accordingly, just right, just perfectly. That's when flags need to be going up and saying like, wait a minute, how do we falsify this? If everything is going just right, something isn't right. That's a sign of the Matrix right
Hmm.
there. Yeah, so I think like being able to ask these questions, the only way science gets better is through more science, right?
Right.
So yeah, bring on the questions, and no question is too hard, because that's like, we as a species are going to evolve, and it's going to be through these kind of processes.
Yeah, I really like the way that they presented that in the article itself. It wasn't a finger pointing, it wasn't a blame game. It was like, here's what we did, here's what was wrong about it, here's how we can correct it. I mean, it was very practical and very straightforward. I didn't get the impression that there was a lot of egos involved or anything like that. It was just a straightforward problem-solving approach, which really appeals to someone like me. We have a little bit of time left. I knew that we were going to have a little bit of time at the end of this segment here, so I have an extra question prepared here, and I want us each to put some deep thought into this. This is very critical. So here's the question. From the standpoint of pure musicianship and skill with their instruments, what is the greatest rock band of all time? Defend your answer. Eli, the science guy, go.
Done. Already got it. I'm just going to go with the scientific consensus, Queen. And I don't need, because of Live Aid, I don't need to justify that, but I can justify it without Live Aid. So we have, obviously, first, of course, Freddie Mercury. If you're talking about mastery of an instrument, this is a guy with a 4-octave vocal range, which if he's not, I'm not confident enough to say that he's the only singer in like the last century or whatever that could do that. But if he's not, he's like one of like 5 or something. So that right there by itself. And not only he, but the band itself has such a range of style, from like arena rock, We Will Rock You, to like opera rock, Bohemian Rhapsody, to like I don't know, like proto thrashers, and like I don't know, Want Somebody to Love was kind of disco, or kind of like, I don't really know. So they have a range. They have
they did the
Freddie
Highlander
Mercury.
soundtrack, right? The Highlander soundtrack, the whole thing, all Queen.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that. I haven't seen Highlander, so
oh, you're out of here. You're out of here.
Yeah,
man.
I am out of here. That's true. There can be only zero me. But additionally, Sir Brian Howard May. Yeah, Sir Brian Howard May, PhD in astrophysics, and Commander of the British Empire is another title that he has. Wow. Built his own guitar with his dad out of a fireplace and a sewing needle, and that's like, it's a simplification, but it's not, like, it's true. And then after the band became famous, he then later was like, I'm going to finish my PhD in astrophysics, which he put on hold so that he could go be Brian May of Queen. I don't know a lot about drums or like rhythm or percussion.
Yeah, and I noticed you're not talking a lot about the rhythm section here, so we got to... Yeah.
I feel, I know that, each of the band members contributed to their songs. I know that Roger Taylor wrote I'm in Love with My Car. That was all him. He's got a pretty solid falsetto himself, powerful backing vocals for Freddie Mercury. So that was a good pairing. John Deacon wrote Another One Bites the Dust and I Want to Break Free. So 2 other fantastic songs, got tight bass lines. It's just they genre hopped. I think they were masters of their instruments. And
strong case. You make a very strong case, Eli. You got us out of the gate with a big answer there. Stephen, what are your thoughts? Best rock band, pure musicianship and skill with their instruments, including vocals.
Like, obviously the answer is the Tragically Hip, but as 2 Americans, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'll try to speak in your language.
Okay.
The White Stripes. Jack and Meg White, they're divorced and they're still in a band together. That's huge. Meg, she plays the drums and she just focuses on like keeping a steady rhythm. And that's huge. And then Jack, he plays guitar and other things, and he also sings. Like,
I'm a big Jack White fan. I think the weak spot in the band, if we would call it a weak spot, I think is Meg, of course. I think, but he's kind of the pulse there. Of course, I could be wrong. I could be wrong here.
Maybe he felt the same way, and that's why they're divorced now.
Not the drummer to be the pulse.
Right, yeah, right. Well, I'm going to throw my answer out there, and although I'm on the verge of changing my mind here after hearing, it's hard to argue with Freddie Mercury. In fact, in my book, he is in the, he has to be mentioned if you talk about best musician on any instrument at all. I think Freddie Mercury's definitely in the discussion
100%.
there, and of course, Brian May's no slouch. I would say Rush, of course. I think they're just the holy trinity, right? We got, speaking of bodacious vocalists, we got Geddy Lee with his very distinctive voice. It annoys the hell out of a lot of people, but he's got a lot of skill there. Freddie Mercury wasn't playing bass when he was singing, although he would mess around with the piano a little bit. But Geddy Lee's on vocals, on bass, and on keyboard all at the same time, right?
That's
and then,
impressive.
of course, Alex Lifeson is routinely brought up when discussing the top rock guitarists of all times. He's got such a huge range and the master of the lengthy solo. And so I love Alex Lifeson. But of course, you have your Freddie Mercury. I have Neil Peart, and he is definitely a master musician, routinely thrown out as possibly the best drummer of all time. I don't want to hear about John Bonham today, but Neil Peart he just mastered. He would learn different styles. He learned how to play jazz drums. He learned how to play all different kinds of drums. He would rehearse even on concert nights. He would rehearse before concerts and so on. He would start working out weeks and months before they went on tour, just so he could have enough stamina. And my favorite Neil Peart song ever was during an interview, and they asked him, "Do you ever get sick of playing Tom Sawyer?" And he said, "I never get sick of playing Tom Sawyer because every once in a while I play it perfectly." And I just loved that. It just totally summed up his attitude towards music right there. And so I love that. But good effort from Steven there. The White Stripes, that's pretty damn good White Stripes there. Queen, though, you're definitely threatening for that top seat, but I still think Rush might have pulled it out here. Let's hear it from all of you out there. Leave a comment below with what you think is the greatest band on pure musicianship and skill with their instruments ever of all time. And if you want to hear more of us just talking about random shit, then just click one of these links.